We'll give you a second to get settled. I'd like to welcome Director Sturdivant back. This is the budget hearing for Public Works. And Director Sturdivant, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chair Vercher. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Gonna have to pull your microphone down.
Thanks for everybody in attendance tonight. I want to introduce the folks that we have here from Public Works. To my right is Sharon Wallstrom. To my left is Sharon Smith. We also have Philip Jones, Jeff Hammond, Billy Fields, Courtney Stone, Kristen Cumrow, Devin Doyle, Jesse Turner, and Charles Bodie. We brought a lot. We tried to anticipate all the questions. So for the sake of getting started, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through, Sharon and I will go through a few things we've been working on, then we're going to have Sharon Wallstrom go through our budget, and then we'll get to the questions. That's what this meeting is about. But before we do that, there's a few people that I want to thank. I think most of you know that I've been away from work for several weeks, and the reason for that is on March 22nd, two months ago today, I had open heart surgery. I had 5 bypass procedures, and yesterday was my first full day back at work. If you didn't know I was out, the reason for that is because Public Works ran so smoothly, and there was no letdown, there was no drop-off. And the credit for that goes to the people that are here tonight that are part of the leadership at Public Works, but it also goes to the 412 employees at Public Works that come in every day and night, and they work really hard, and they're very responsible, and just great folks. So I want to thank all of them. I also especially want to thank Sharon Wallstrom, who stepped up and was acted as the director for 2 months, did a great job. All of you know Sharon, know how hard she works and how competent she is. So I want to thank all of those people, and I'm just glad to be back. So,
welcome back. Let's talk about the budget.
All right. Okay, so Sharon and I are going to go through a few things that we've been working on in the last couple years or so. In November, we opened the Division Street Bridge in the Sobro area, New Bridge. We have built 22 miles of new sidewalk. We repaired 32 miles of sidewalk. And I hope you've noticed in our meetings that we've speeded up our production on sidewalks. We have 21 new miles of bike lanes. In 2016, we had 163 lane miles that we repaved. In 2017, that went up to 287 miles, and that's a direct result of increased capital funding. We released a new online tool in the last year that allows the public to look at our capital projects, where they are across the county, including the schedules and the budgets. And then we've had over 5,000 hits on that since we opened it. I think most of those were from Angie and Jeremy Elrod, but and that's okay. We also had in partnership with Metro ITS, we completed an audit of our IT system. We identified several risks and opportunities, and we're working on those now. We were able to accommodate all of the special events last year at the Public Works Department. As you know, there were numerous, and at times we had things like the Stanley Cup playoffs and the CMA Festival happening at the same time, so that was a challenge. We've started the USD annexation process in 3 districts. Council members Van Rees, Pridemore, and Anthony Davis, and with the street lighting has begun, and we will have provide trash pickup and recycling by October. So now I'm going to let Sharon Smith add some things to that list as well.
So as As some of you know, we also are in the process of looking and developing a long-term zero waste master plan for Nashville and Davidson County. And part of the reason we're doing this, which I think everybody knows about, is the upcoming closure of the Middle Point landfill. Middle Point landfill is actually used by 19 counties here in Middle Tennessee. It takes more waste per day than any other landfill in the state of Tennessee. So almost 4,000 tons a day of trash go into that landfill. So there are a lot of people that are very concerned about the upcoming closure of it, and part of our strategy is to look at what we can do in putting together a plan that will help us reduce more and get less waste going into the landfill. So over the past several years, the regional mayors have been getting together to talk about transit. About a year or two ago, they started talking about waste because all of them are going to be impacted by this landfill closure. And the Greater Nashville Regional Council has recently convened the regional solid waste directors to try and help us all find ways to work together. A lot of them are looking to Nashville and the programs that we're working on to try and be a lot more aggressive about diverting our waste from landfills. One of the things we did as part of our solid waste master plan is a waste characterization. And what that has shown us are areas where we are producing a lot of material and how we can focus on those materials. So no big surprise. Construction and demolition waste is one of those areas that we can really look to focus on in the future to help reduce cost and help reduce landfilling. Food waste, organics, is another major area that we're looking on. And so as part of this plan, we're looking at aggressive and long-term programs, policies, initiatives that will help lead us into the future and to be more cost savings and avoid landfilling, as well as trying to work together with the regional counties so that we all aren't duplicating services. Coming up in a couple of weeks, starting the week of June 11th, and then the following week, June 18th, we're going to be hosting some public meetings out in the communities. We'll have 5 of them, and we'll be getting you information on where those meetings will be and hope that you will help get the word out to your constituents. Another initiative that is housed at Public Works, but is actually a mayor's office initiative, is the Hub. Public Works Call Center has been utilized to take the calls. We've got 6 full-time and 2 part-time employees taking calls in the Hub and also working the queues. Now, as you all know, there's an app that people can utilize to send information in. To date, over 70,000 requests have come in through the Hub, and about 77% of those calls are directly related to Public Works that we have to address. So kind of shows you just the sheer volume of citizen requests out there that intersect with Public Works every day. Another initiative over the last year was the on-demand trash truck, sometimes called the roving trash truck. With this program, Public Works has picked up over 1,000 tons of litter and illegal dumping throughout the county, so it's had a major impact. I did want to let you know that in the coming weeks, I will be approaching you to approve a litter grant from the Tennessee Department of Transportation. They had a special litter grant this year, and Metro Nashville will get $200,000 to use over the next 2 fiscal years to promote litter prevention and to work with communities to do a PR campaign and hopefully reduce the amount of litter that we see in our roadways, and also that Mr. Potter referenced that people are seeing in streams. Finally, I'd also like to talk about the Honky Tonk Glass program that rolled out earlier this year. This program is focused specifically on the Public Works customers downtown, the honky tonks that produce a large amount of glass. Between 60 to 75% of what they throw away every day is glass. So far to date, we have collected about 180 tons of glass through, and we are phasing in. We actually have completely phased in. All of Broadway is now on board, starting January 2nd to date. So we've had a great amount of success getting all those long necks out of the trash and into the recycling.
Are we live? Yes. Since Mark was so kind to thank me, I also want to say that I don't believe there's anyone happier to have him back than I am. I have a whole new appreciation for what he does and what he brings to our department. So I'm so thrilled to have him back. We were funded for 3 additional items this year as part of our budget. The first one is for the USD annexation that was mentioned earlier. We did receive money to begin the lighting, and those expenses will bring about electricity and debt service on the fixtures and maintenance on the fixtures are included as part of our budget this year. Also, trash and recycling services and the waste disposal that will be generated with the trash. Those costs are approximately $1.2 million. We have also collected, Metro has collected revenue for the change between the GSD tax rate and the USD tax rate. They collected that from October of last year through February of this year. So this program is cost neutral. It is an expense increase, but it is also a revenue increase. The second thing that we have looked at this year is the downtown garage money, specifically the library garage. The library garage was expanded 3 additional levels this last year, and so we will be receiving additional revenue for the parkers on those levels. We will also be paying the debt service on the construction for those 3 additional levels, and so that's primarily what this $996,000 expense increase is, but it is also neutral because the revenue is covering the expenditures. We also receive money for our special purpose fund, and the primary fund in there that has received the expense increase is the sidewalk in lieu fund. Councilmember Henderson put through legislation last year. The cost of the linear foot per sidewalk has gone up. That has increased our revenue number along with some of the other regulations that were part of that legislation. So that revenue has gone up, and we have increased our expenditures in that area to match that revenue. As soon as we have revenue that's substantial enough to contribute to a project, we immediately move that revenue from that contribution zone over into that project. So those were the 3 items that we received this year, and like I said, the expenses are offset by the additional collections of the revenues. So although we look like we received $4.3 million, we truly are a status quo budget for Public Works for this year.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. Director, welcome back. And you're exactly right, Sharon, because when we sit down and try to understand the way the numbers all operate, I kind of look at GSD across the board, not special purpose. There's so many aspects of the budget. But for what you do, your department actually has received since 2013 the lowest percentage of increase in operating from Metro of any department, as far as the big departments, okay? And so thank you for the work you're doing. Director, you and I have already spoken about Central Pike. You're frustrated, I'm frustrated. And so I would like for us to keep pushing forward to that. That's a sidebar conversation we'll go to. There was one thing you said that I don't quite understand. You said 412 FTEs, but yet you're showing 439. So do you have that many vacancies that you are not able to fill?
Currently, we have 32 vacancies. Okay. Primarily, and let me pull my paperwork out, most of those are in our operational area. Those jobs do turn over rapidly. And just as an example, just this week, and I want to take the time to say this, we had an employee die unexpectedly over the weekend.
Sorry.
So, and I want to say a shout out to her family and let them know her name was Brandy Dismayne, and we just want to tell the family that we're thinking about them and that we're sorry for their loss. So with that said, our turnover is tremendous.
Okay.
We have 25 operational workers. 7 of those were for the USD annexation. We have not received the equipment yet, so we have not hired those workers yet. 6 of them have resigned or retired within the last month. That's how quick our turnover is in the operational area. And within the last 45 days, we have received approval to begin the hiring process on 6 more employees. And then we're still waiting on approval for 6 more employees in that area.
Okay. And what does that do for the overall operational requirements from your department and the services that you provide to all 35 districts out here? What kind of restraints or challenges, I guess, is maybe the proper wording for, does it present for Public Works as a whole?
I mean, whenever we're missing employees, then we're short of crews. We have other crews that work overtime to make up for that. Especially just like this week with the storms that happened, we had 50 trees that were down, and the guys that had worked all day went in and worked some during the night, and it drives overtime. So we don't have as many crews out there doing the things that we feel like need to be done, and we're in situations where they have to be accomplished, we're working the overtime.
And so
otherwise, it's a delay.
I'm sorry, I
That's
apologize. So with the vacancies that are there, because you're really not showing an increased quote in the payroll, is that how you're accommodating the overtime, is on the vacancies that are currently present?
Yes, we have saved quite a bit of money this year due to vacancies.
Okay.
So that offsets the overtime. It offsets some other expenses in areas that we may not have expected to spend as much money.
Okay. Well, I just want to say this. During the time of, since I've been on the council, you know, I've watched Public Works move from X number, I think it was it twice a year or 3 times a year, but you've added 1 year in brush pickup, or one additional brush pickup. And you guys continue to operate efficiently with the money that you're provided. And so I just want to say thanks. You're one of the areas that I know everybody's working hard. Yeah, we get frustrated. There are no ifs, ands, or buts. Like I said, you and I'll have a sidebar on what's going on out there with Central Pike and everything else. But I just want to tell you thank you, because the dollars you've been given, you've been good stewards, in my opinion, over the 7 years that I've been involved with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Glover. Vice Chair Schulman, at large.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just trying to recover from Councilman Glover giving a glowing recommendation of a department. I am extremely worried now about your department.
Yeah,
if
they
he
should
likes
be.
it, I'm very, very worried. And I think we're going to have to just cancel tonight's meeting, bring them back, and do a thorough review of what's going on in Public Works. Director, I'm glad you're back. I will say the first thing I was going to say was you mentioned Councilor Henderson and Councilman Elrod blowing up your website, I guess. Do you have the ability to block their access? Can you actually stop them from doing that? You don't have to answer that. A couple of things. You mentioned special events. Okay, so I know that's an issue. We have a million things going on in this city. How do you deal with it? And do you all is the city doing that, or when somebody has a special event, do they provide the payments for you all to clean up after them? What's going on with all that?
So in the case of a special event in the traditional sense of a festival or something like that, the organizer themselves is actually responsible for. The problem for Public Works comes in a couple of ways. One, if it's a very large citywide event like the 4th of July or New Year's Eve, the Country Music Marathon, yes, our crews have to go out and clean up after those events at cost to Metro. But in addition to that, a lot of our cost comes from mass traffic and responding to the requests we get, the public safety requests we get from the police for managing mass traffic. So that is technically not a special event, but it is events at Bridgestone Arena, Nissan Stadium, even the baseball stadium, large events downtown that cause, Predators is another great example, where we have to go in and put barricades out and provide service, and then, of course, clean up the streets downtown after it's all over.
We also, we know when certain events are going to take place, like Predators games or Titans games. What we don't know is, like next week the president's coming to town, and we'll have to, that's one we didn't plan for. We can kind of program some unplanned events, but we have to respond to that. That's often what throws us off.
Okay. So I understand the president's visit, but let's go back and understand to some extent maybe the predators and things like that. But like the country music half marathon and the full marathon is an event staged by an outside group that actually does it. So do they pay you a fee for cleaning up, or do we just take that on as a responsibility?
That is, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that is a Metro-sponsored event, and so we provide that service. It is an event that the CVC feels brings a huge economic development. Unlike a 5K where local people are running a marathon, people are coming from out of town. They're flying in, they're staying in hotels, so it has a broader impact on the community than, say, a little, you know.
Sure, I understand that, but I mean, actually, there's a fee that's paid to a group that actually puts on the race. Now, how much of that goes to the CVC, I don't know, or if anything goes there. But I guess what I'm trying to do is figure out how much are you all on the hook for lots of different special events that are being actually put on by a specific entity, and do you all get compensated for any of the stuff that you do for any of these events that eventually you have to go back and clean up for?
Yeah, not on the Metro events, and on the other private events, we do not provide any specific service. They are required to clean up after their own event.
Okay, so we're not cleaning up for a group that we shouldn't be. They should be.
Yeah.
If they're putting it on especially or have got a permit for, they're responsible for cleaning up.
Yeah,
Is that right?
as part of the permitting process, they have to put together a waste and recycling plan and how they will clean up after the event.
Okay. Okay. Two other questions. One is, at one point, I had my last year's budget book in front of me, but I remember that we had discussions over some transportation positions. Whatever happened to those? Are they in here somewhere, or did we just not fill them, or are they?
They are in here, and we have filled them and lost some people also in the engineering department. Right now, we still have, in engineering, we still have 2 vacancies, primarily because, frankly, we have gone through the process of trying to hire, and we have picked people, and we have offered the jobs, and we have had the jobs turned down because of the salary rate. With all the construction in town, with the need for engineers by everyone, it has been very difficult to hire engineers. We have had to drop some of those Engineer 2 positions back to engineer in training for people who don't have their license yet but are working towards it. So we have been working diligently to try to get those filled, but have run into roadblocks with that.
Okay. Okay. Just interested. Last question goes back to these the honky-tonk recycling programs. So it used to be that glass was not a good thing to have because there was too much of it and you couldn't get much money for it for recycling. Has that changed? Is that why we're trying to pick it all up and get it recycled?
The revenue for glass is probably not changed in the last 30 years. It's not one of those commodities that will make a lot of money, but it has a lot of weight. So it actually is good for recycling rates. And it is, even though it's a small program, it's really kind of focused on the tourist industry, and you have a massive amount of glass being, thrown away. I've tried to convince some of the honky-tonks that draft beer was a good idea, and they insisted I was wrong. So here we have all these glass bottles, and we do have markets for recycling. Right now our glass is going to Strategic Materials in Atlanta where they make more glass bottles, fiberglass, and various things like that. So there are markets. It's just not, like aluminum, for example.
Yeah, I guess, and I like the concept of what you're trying to do. I guess one of the questions would be, is there some inducement to get them to switch to aluminum because I assume that's a better product to recycle?
Yeah, I'm not sure that anybody could convince them to.
Well, I am happy to recommend that Councilman Glover go down there and actually spend some time there. So anyway.
So he can go honky-tonk.
Actually going to recommend him for one of those transportation positions so he could leave the council and go to work for you all. I think that answers all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I want to continue your question was actually what I had written down as it relates to special events. And I know we may not be capturing it, but it is an operational cost. If you could, and you don't have to, if you don't have it, that's fine. You can provide it to us at a later date. Like, what would that value be? Also, in the event, I know they go through the permitting process and they submit a plan and so forth. But what happens if I'm a vendor, I have an event, and I just don't clean up? What's the consequence? I'm gone. I've packed up. I've come into your city. I've collected my revenue, and what's the consequence?
There are a couple of things we can do. One is special events have to pay what's called a sanitation deposit, which they only get back after they clean up after the event. We make sure there aren't any issues. That is,
How much is that?
$500. We also they have to submit to Metro a certificate of liability insurance covering Metro that potentially could be hit for cleanup costs. We have had some instances in the past, particularly on the pedestrian bridge, where there was a event some years ago, some sort of zombie walk, and they got fake blood all over the pedestrian bridge, and we made them go up and power wash it and clean it all off.
Okay. Council Lady Dow.
Thank you. I just had two really quick questions. One was you mentioned about the new landfill and finding space, and I was wondering what areas are you looking for siting the new landfill?
We are not looking to site a new landfill. The landfill that most of the counties in our area use is reaching capacity. It's a privately owned landfill. So what the strategy is from most of the regional cities and counties is to see what we can do cooperatively to find other alternatives. I'm not aware of, certainly Nashville's not looking at having a new landfill, and I'm not aware of other counties in our area that
So
are.
what are the other alternatives? Is it just, what are some of those?
Sure. So some of the most important alternatives is a large portion of our waste is organic material, and looking at methods to divert that. So not just food waste, but food, yard waste, all of the material that naturally will biodegrade, soiled paper out of your home. A large portion of what we throw away, if we looked at everything that can go in your recycling cart plus paper, you're looking at over 70% of what you and I produce every year. So we're trying to look at ways that we can focus on those areas, which is part of the reason we wanted to do this waste characterization, to give us that kind of data. And we do have some composting facilities going in to the region. There are none here in Davidson County at the moment, but they're in outlying areas where the property values are a little, or the cost of development's a little cheaper.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification. And I want to go back to talking about the light poles. You mentioned about replacing some light poles with the new, purchasing light poles and everything with the new acquisition from the GSD, the USD to GSD. But I was going to ask, what we have, and I think I've mentioned this before, down Bell Road, those light posts have been there forever, and one of them have duct tape on it. It's bent. They fall down frequently. The lights are frequently out, and I wanted to know do we have any type of capital plan or any plan? And I'm sorry to ask this question now, but I don't know if I'm going to make part of the capital conversation on this. But what are the plans to replace those? I noticed that people, you go out, and I don't know if it's you or NES. NES says it's you all, and you all says it's NES. But I'm trying to figure out who's responsible for replacing those light poles and the lights inside of that.
If it's the section that I'm thinking about, and we'll have to sit down and have a conversation offline about that, some of those poles out there were installed by private
Not those.
property owners.
Yeah.
It's not those? Okay.
No. Yeah, these are not the ones in the crossing. These are the ones down Bell Road. That is, I know it's a TDOT, as a highway and so forth, but these are the ones down Bell Road. I've already submitted something. I submitted something last year, and I submitted something again this year about it. And the reason why I asked, because I was over in East Nashville. I spent the last month or so, actually 3 months in Inglewood and out in that area. And I noticed they have these nice black decorative poles that are being put in and replacing regular poles. And I'm sorry to ask this now, but I'm just want to know, like, where do we get the funds to pay for those decorating poles? And what is the plan on replacing? Do we budget for pole replacement? How does that work?
The decorative poles would have been done by the neighborhoods because we never do that. We only do the wooden poles, or we'll do decorative poles in downtown Nashville or in some big project like that. But in the neighborhoods, we never do the decorative poles. It's either the subdivision or the contractor has installed those whenever he built the subdivision.
Okay.
So they will be responsible for replacing those poles. As far as the wooden poles go, we work with NES. We have a replacement schedule. They're constantly maintaining those and looking at those, and then they charge us for the maintenance or the replacement of those poles
Okay.
whenever they need to be done.
Okay, I just want to ask, and the reason why I bring it up, I'll bring it back to the operating, is that we spend a lot of operation money going out there, patching up those poles, replacing a light, putting them back up when they're not working, digging under the ground, interrupting traffic with it. And I've observed this over the last, I would say, 6 years or so, a constant. We're spending money on them, and at some point we need to let them go. They've been out there since 1960-something, and at some point they're no longer useful. And when we're starting to spend more operating costs trying to manage to keep them up versus just replacing them, I think we have to look at that as a budgetary concern. And so that's why I bring it up. I brought it up the last few years, and I'm bringing it up again because I do think it is far past time for us to make some adjustments there versus coming out, digging in the ground, patching up something and coming back. I think we're wasting a lot of money doing that, and I would like to see those fixed and replaced, and we just write that cost off for a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady Dow. Councilman Cooper, at large.
Thank you very much. Good to see you, Director. A couple of kind of separate questions. So, in effect, for the downtown parking lot and for the USD annexation, you are getting all the cost and none of the revenue? The revenue is going to finance, but you're being charged the cost for these two things, the $996,000 for the downtown parking? You were saying in the end it was revenue neutral to the city.
We have a contract with the Downtown Partnership to manage those garages, and so the revenue that we receive off of the courthouse garage goes completely to debt service to pay for the construction of the garage that's underneath this building. The library garage, we do receive revenue from that after all the expenses are paid for. So Public Works will receive that revenue. It sits in its own fund. It's one of the special purpose funds. And then that fund, we spend the additional revenue that we receive, that's Metro's portion from that, on repairs. So sump pumps break, escalators break, elevators break, we have to repair the stairs, we have to replace the lighting, things like that. And we use that money for both the downtown garage, which is underneath us, and the library garage.
So the $996,400 is an increased cost?
It's also an increased cost because we are going to pay the debt service on the construction portion of the library garage for those additional 3 levels. So we'll earn revenue for that, but we'll also pay debt service on that because of the construction cost.
Okay. So in that case, the $996,400 is your increased cost?
Yes.
And then surely it can't be to the penny, the increased revenue.
It's not. We're projecting that it's just slightly under the revenue that we're going to be bringing in. And so that additional revenue will be used for the repairs and maintenance on the various items.
So you're getting both the cost and the
Yes.
revenue ultimately. Okay.
And it flows into that special purpose fund.
Well, so so the parking then is a break-even proposition for you, for Public Works downtown?
The parking is not a complete break even. We do have excess revenue off of the library garage. And so that money is spent on what I just discussed as all the repairs that are necessary to keep the garages going.
Okay, thanks. We're shifting on a question I'm asked all the time, and just with experts here in the room. Even though it's a TDOT project, I'm interested in your perspective. The 440 repaving, right? which was so terrible for so long, and this is the question I get asked, then like in a week, it was done. Why did it take so many months of such terrible conditions when it only took a week?
Well, I asked our staff the same
Oh,
question. so
okay.
it makes
What
me
did they
feel
say?
better. But that's just a temporary fix. That's not the project. If you're talking about the blacktop,
Yeah.
That's just a temporary patch.
So we could have done that temporary patch months ago.
Well, that's the question I had. And I can't answer why they didn't do it months ago, but I think it just got so bad that they knew they had to do something in order to try to, get us to the actual project, which will start later in the year.
Okay. So,
When they start the actual project, they'll close lanes and all kinds of stuff.
okay, so this is not the actual fix, okay? And it conceivably could have been done earlier, okay? Another question, moving along. In Public Works, we never fund a traffic study ourselves, the government, metro government, right? We don't do traffic studies like for the whole county or for sub-areas of the county.
Generally not.
I mean, like, okay, so all the traffic studies that are ever done are in effect sort of sponsored traffic studies by projects?
Some contractors will go out and do their own traffic studies whenever they're looking at projects. Whenever we receive requests for intersection improvements or stop signs or traffic signals, we will contract with someone to go out and do a traffic study to make sure that the request warrants what has been asked for.
That the scope of work in the study is what you would like to have covered. So you can request traffic studies, but every traffic study that exists done at Public Works about traffic in Nashville, every one of them is in effect sponsored and paid for by a developer.
Not everyone.
I don't think it's that simple.
Okay? How would it be accurate?
Devin, you want to try that one? We're going to ask Devin Doyle.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman, I mean, through the years, we have sought federal and state funds to do various studies. We've done crash studies, identifying high accident intersection locations. We have done corridor studies at different times over the years, pedestrian safety studies, analysis of pedestrian crashes and things of that nature. So frequently we have sought funds through the federal process, through the MPO to fund some of these studies. In addition to some that we've done internal, we've done signal timing studies that we have funded locally, and we've also done signal timing studies countywide that we have managed to secure federal funding on.
Okay, so the federal funding would be the biggest source of sort of objective traffic studies, unsponsored traffic studies.
I'd say it's probably a pretty good blend of locally funded projects historically as well as federally funded.
And when you say locally funded, that is developer paid for. When you're saying locally funded, it's not metro. I mean, there's no money in this budget for traffic study or information, is there?
No, I can't.
It would not be in the operating budget. It would be part of the capital budget.
It has happened before on the capital budget, Talia is saying. Okay. Well, then speaking of the capital budget and the operating budget, we had this transit plan quite famously, and you all, does that, the fact that we don't have, I mean, you had some expense last year on preparing that we don't have anymore. Does that provide some headroom for you in a status quo budget going forward because you had that expense that you don't have going forward?
No, that was in the capital budget.
That was all in capital. And how much was expended?
In the capital? It was $4 million between MTA and Public Works. I think our portion was about 2.7.
2.7, but that's not going to help you in the headroom in the capital, in the operating budget, okay? And then finally, overtime expenses in your budget, what are they? Are you anticipating overtime in the year ahead?
We constantly run overtime.
Right.
Like we said, we're missing some crews. We have some vacancies. Storms come up, the flood, tornadoes. We're going to run overtime for that. We'll run overtime whenever, like at Christmas, we have a lot more trash. We'll have to run overtime for that, picking up everything. They're cleaning up downtown.
So what's the overtime in this budget,
I do not have that with me, but I can get
Okay.
that to you.
particularly compared to last year, and whether it's a
Right.
good estimate or whether it should be increased?
Well, I have to give kudos to Philip Jones. He does a fantastic job of managing the overtime, and we're constantly looking at that to make sure that we remain within our budget numbers, barring some completely extenuating circumstance like a tornado or a flood.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Cooper. I'm just looking here, council members, for those on the committee first, so bear with me. We'll go to Council Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher, Director Sturdivant. I did, as it relates to overtime, Councilman Cooper, I did want to express thanks. Southwest Nashville District 34, with this kind of microburst straight line winds on Sunday, lost many, many mature trees, huge trees, and I'm so grateful for that overtime because we had roadways blocked and so forth. So I appreciate the Public Works crews. I saw them back out today, kind of coming back to get the big hunks of massive oak trees they took off the streets and pick those up. And so our neighborhoods really especially appreciate that. So
We always appreciate a good storm right before the budget.
just reminds everyone how important the work you do is. I wanted to ask, because it seems like it's a little bit betwixt and between as it relates to responsibility for trash pickup for MTA bus shelters and kind of where that lives. I know often I've understood that to be a little bit, nobody knows really to whom that belongs, and thus we have a lot of bus benches that do not have a companion trash can because, the message we want to send is take it with you, pack it in, pack it out, like don't leave your stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of the ones I see, we've done some good work adding little spurs of extra sidewalk for accessibility to those bus benches. And then now on that sidewalk under that bus bench are, all kinds of fast food, et cetera, et cetera. Can y'all speak to how you coordinate and collaborate? And because as we're expanding our bus shelters, right, to dignify our transit riders so they don't have to stand in ditches, most of those shelters that it seems we're contracted for have a companion trash can. Who's emptying those, et cetera?
I'll try that one.
Okay.
It's been a while since I talked to MTA about it, but MTA is responsible. Their first responsibility is MTA, but quite frankly, they struggle with it. They ask for our help, and to the extent that we can help them, we do. We ask that when we do try to help them, that it's on kind of a route that we're already doing, because it's not an efficient process at all. The cans are so small.
They are too small, right?
That it's not something that we can do efficiently. There's also, and that's part of the problem why trash piles up, is that the cans are small. And then MTA has a rule that you're not allowed to take food and drinks on the bus. So and very often the bus stops are near fast food. So when people buy something, then they have to put it down before they can get on the bus.
Right.
But we, to the extent that we can help them, we do.
Okay, so perhaps our standard shelter with which we have a contract either shouldn't have a trash can or should have a bigger trash can, and we should have some messaging around take it with you or something like that. And probably MTA just needs to figure out that you can indeed bring food on a bus if you have it contained in a plastic bag or something. I mean, honestly.
I think those are all good points for discussion.
Okay, all right. That's kind of a side point because I just wondered how much time y'all were kind of putting to doing that. So from a staffing perspective, I know at the special hearing that we had for the Walk and Bike Strategic Plan implementation, the Public Works special meeting, y'all did sort of a kind of an org chart of sorts, and that mirrors somewhat what you have in our budget book here. But as I look at just kind of the general groupings, Ms. Wallstrom, you spoke to the difficulty in hiring into kind of the engineering group. I'm just looking at kind of the big chunks of kind of FTEs in maintenance and repair. And I wanted to ask if we could, in time, not necessarily in the context of this budget hearing, but just understanding operationally, because you all have so many kind of contractual relationships, right, as it relates to sidewalk implementation and review and what gets done by Metro staff, what gets done through contracts, just to kind of have a better understanding of, oh, all 11 of these signal techs are in this group and the engineers are in this group, and just really getting a better understanding of that because, as Mr. Glover pointed out, you all do a lot with a little, and I think what that has sometimes meant is you have a lot of work that's contractual that, you know, as we look at, say, sidewalk cost and otherwise, that there's been, you know, some discussion around, you know, what are the kind of the merits of that and the trade-offs, frankly. So just getting a better understanding, I think, of how all these clusters of staffing are related to your particular operational groups would be helpful. I see here the parking patrol officers 1 and 2. I know Council Lady Allen, through the budget process, potentially funded additional for some sort of neighborhood parking maintenance. I had heard a news snippet somewhere that we had $2 million in uncollected parking tickets. I don't know if that's in y'all's space, if it's an MNPD space. Can you kind of speak to the overlap there and to what extent Public Works is engaged in parking patrol on street parking matters?
We have enforcement officers that do issue the tickets.
And that's just these 5?
That's just these 5.
Okay.
But the tickets are sent to the traffic and parking court downtown. And so they are responsible for adjudicating and collecting on those tickets. And we do not, Public Works does not receive that money from the tickets. We issue them, but we don't receive the money.
Okay, that's something to think about. Is that, I mean, can you speak to that a little bit more about why it is?
We're doing a portion of the work, and the courts are also doing a portion of the work in processing the tickets and going through and looking and running them through credit and everything else, and notifying people whenever they've missed their court date and everything else. So that is just the way that it has traditionally been set up. We receive the money for the parking meters. We collect the money on the parking meters. But when we issue the tickets, because the police can also issue the tickets, I learned the other day that Vanderbilt police can issue tickets as well as Metro Airport Authority police can issue tickets. So there has to be a central place where all those tickets can be processed and adjudicated, and that is in the traffic court.
Do we know how much is garnered from adjudicating those parking tickets?
I do not.
And where that money goes?
I don't have that number with me.
Mr. Kelsey?
That would be a question for the circuit court clerk. I don't have that information.
Okay.
We can get that, Council Lady Henderson.
Okay.
I just inquired about what was outstanding, not what we actually collected.
Okay, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. How much is a parking ticket in Metro?
Wait a minute, hold on. We had too many people.
It's 11, right?
It's turning you off. There you go.
It's 11.
Jeff,
It's
you're
11.
on, Jeff.
The two different costs. One is $11 for a standard ticket, $50 is a towaway infraction. I don't want to give incorrect information, but my understanding, total revenue collected from parking tickets is something in the order of $700,000 a year.
Okay, so $11 is not a deterrent to anything. So is that if, I understand anecdotally that, there are folks who recognize that, violating parking in a certain area they're only going to incur $11 charge, and that's a pretty cheap way to park. And so they, it's 2-hour parking, but they stay there all day long. So who's looking at that? That's why I asked Mr. Kelsey, because I understood there was maybe some research around our parking. What do we need to do as a city, in your view, to address this issue? Because if we have $2 million outstanding, the tickets are only 11. I mean, that's no deterrent. And additionally, we have people parking in bike lanes. We have people, I mean, we have no enforcement in that regard. So we have kind of a challenge here.
I wouldn't disagree with any of those points, and I think the fractured nature of both the collections and enforcement and everything around parking management is why we are engaged with some consultants and why we've looked at this issue over the past year and why we are moving towards hopefully modernizing the on-street parking system.
I appreciate that. So through that process, then that would all be consolidated potentially, and so we wouldn't have to ask the circuit court clerk where that $2 million went. That would be all centralized.
Potentially, there are things that the circuit court clerk does that are mandated by state law. So as part of this process, we'll have to figure out, what is possible to consolidate and hopefully increase the efficiency of and what needs to stay over there. But all that will be determined through that process. Okay, I appreciate that. And then Chair Vercher, lastly, Ms. Wallstrom had very kindly answered some questions that I posed to her related to sidewalk costs, which I recognize as capital, but kind of the implementation of our sidewalk program. So rather than getting into that today, I think that's something I'll just put on the SharePoint then to share with other colleagues. But Ms. Wallstrom, just as I understand it, the current contracts that you have, you're going to be reconfiguring those. Can you just speak to that briefly for the public to understand, just summarize that without kind of going into that at length?
Okay. Currently, we have 2 contracts. One is primarily design and inspection, and the other one is primarily construction. We are looking at splitting that into 5 different contracts. Unfortunately, Mr. Reed had another priority tonight. He is speaking at a convention tomorrow, so he has already left town, but they're going to do the inspection in a separate contract. They're going to do 2 design build contracts, 2 or 3. They're going to do, what else? Project management, and he may know more about it than I do.
And repairs.
And a repair contract.
This came about, there's really 2 things that kind of led us to this. One was the contracts are expiring.
In August, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And then the other was within the last year, there was a lot of frustration in the council, but also in the mayor's office and in the neighborhoods that it was taking too long. And so we looked closely at how we could speed up. And one of the easy ways is just to throw more people and resources at it. So we've expanded it, and we're also going to go to a design build delivery method where the engineer will work for the contractor. We think that'll also help speed things up.
Okay, and I guess one of the goals that or one of the things I had asked you all about is from a goal perspective. So, right, there is the concern, and I think it's consistently improving as far as kind of how that implementation, now that y'all have consistent funding. But another concern you hear in the community is just that our sidewalk cost is so high, right? So if we look at our peer cities through the walk and bike strategic plan process, recognizing that every city it's not always apples to apples on how each city quantifies that. So I guess, if you're reworking the contracts on the time end of things, but, if we're also looking at, do you think in the way that you are reconfiguring that and then bidding that out to 5 separate, that there are advantages in the cost space as well?
I think so. We feel like in the past we may have spent too much money on design, and that, I hate to sound critical of the people that worked on it, but we may have dedicated too much of a project to that portion of it. Okay. So we think we can improve that. Keep in mind too that it's kind of a pendulum. We wanted to improve the quality of the sidewalks that
Absolutely.
we built.
And,
Mayor Barry signed an executive order for complete street sidewalks, and we took that seriously, and we try to build them to the highest standard that we can. And so And we'll continue to do that, but we think there are efficiencies that we can gain and hopefully bring that overall cost down.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady Henderson. Council Lady Hurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also had a question regarding the garage. And how long do you think it's going to take to pay for the construction that was done on the library's garage?
That I do not have a time frame on yet because they have not issued the bonds. So right now, we're just making debt payments against the commercial paper that was put out there for that. So hopefully shortly we'll know.
Okay.
But we based our estimate, I believe, on 30 years. So.
Okay. Now, I do depend on, and Mark, I'm so glad to see you back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be
I did not know what was going on, because you're right, your team has just done a marvelous job. I think I probably deal with them a lot than maybe some of the other council people. So I have to give a shout out to Philip Jones and Don Reed and Gordon Richard and Sharon Smith, because they see me and talk to me or somebody on my staff all the time, and they have just done a great job to support our efforts. I would like to get the demographics, if you don't have to give it to me now, but I'd like to get the demographics of your leadership team.
We've got it for the department, but we'll break that down.
Okay. And I need one other thing. If you could please do something for this crack in front of my house. My neighbor across the street says he's not going to give me 100 baked ham for Christmas if I don't get it done. And if I can tell him that I spoke to the man himself, not the man sitting next to the man, just let him know.
Is there a crack in the street?
It is a crack in the street. He insists that if we don't do something about it, we're gonna have a crater.
Check it out.
Okay.
Thank you, Council Lady Hurt. Councilman Bettany.
Yes. Were you guys here when I asked Jameson some questions before? Yes? Okay. Chair, can I ask another question of Mr. Jameson?
Absolutely. Vice Chair distracted me. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mr. Jameson.
Mr. Jameson.
Contrary to what Diane Black says, we don't do catch and release. Anytime ICE picks somebody up, they take them immediately to a detention facility. Is that the way it's going to be with Metro? Are we going to arrest people immediately?
I don't think that's been determined yet. We simply cannot enact legislation that would enable us to refrain from enforcement. Exactly how far we have to go, we've not yet been advised or instructed.
Okay, so let's assume that people will follow up on ICE rules. That means that we are going to have the personal belongings of 10,000 people, just roughly. I don't know how many undocumented immigrants are in the city. So we were talking about recycling before, we were talking about cars before, we're talking about personal belongings like furniture. I think you're going to see probably when we start implementing this great state law that we are going to start seeing people, landlords, putting the stuff of the people on the street, and we're going to have to start picking it up. Also, the other question to Jameson is, do we get to own the stuff that people leave behind when we arrest them, or does it belong to somebody else?
No, it's held usually as a bailment, but we can't maintain it. If it's not collected, we then do reserve the right to sell it and then maintain those proceeds. But if it's collected by the rightful owner, we have to give them the opportunity to obtain it.
But if they don't have a power of attorney and they are deported, then there is nobody there to follow up. Right. Okay, so who does e-bid in the city? Who's responsible for that? That's not Public Works, right? e-bid, the bidding system that disposes of property like cars and stuff?
General services.
Huh?
It's done by General Services.
Okay, I'll talk to them. When it comes to you guys, it's the issue of cars, right? If somebody is arrested and their car is on the street or ends up in a parking lot, then we're going to have to deal with that vehicle. So I guess what I'm asking you is a couple of questions, favors. One is that you also, because you interact with the public either through the beautification program or other programs that Public Works does, that you put it on the budget to train people. We don't want any immigrant that goes to participate on a cleaning program to be arrested because somebody thinks they are undocumented. So that will be one. Two, I'd like the people that deal with towing and car property to see how we're going to dispose of these 10,000 vehicles that are going to be left behind. Furthermore, all the belongings that people are going to leave on the street that we need to either recycle or dispose or put on some kind of a site for disposal, that will be something that you probably need to figure out, right? Sharon?
I suppose theoretically, yes.
Yes. Okay, so if that'd probably be something that it's not an urgency. The law will kick in on January 1st, so we can start dealing with that after January 1st, but I will encourage you to start thinking about how you're going to plan on dealing with all these personal belongings. I'm sure we're going to separate watches and TV sets and telephones from things that are not valuable, like maybe mattresses. So if you can start planning on that, how we're going to deal with all those items, that will be a good way to be proactive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Bettany. We have two more council members that's going to be recognized, and then before that, we will adjourn. Council Lady Karen Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. Director Sturdivant, thank you for everything you do, and I'm glad to see you back. I did not know that you were hospitalized for that, and my prayers, Lord have mercy, that's a lot that you've been through. One thing I want to say first before I ask my budget question is that Public Works is one of the most responsive, service-minded, people-focused department in all of Metro government. When all of us as council members contact you all for whatever it is, whether it's organizing our cleanups or what have you, you all always respond. Anytime I send a picture over to your customer service department, within 24 hours, things are acted upon and completed. And I have no words but to say that we appreciate all of the staff of your department because they do a tremendous amount of work, and we thank you for that. Last year's budget, we were talking about you're paying for CDLs, if I recall. Is that something that's within this budget? Because I couldn't see it. Are we paying for the CDLs for the employees? Does that help with retention?
We do not pay for the CDLs, but we do require that they receive their CDL before their 6 months is up.
Is it costly to pay for that?
I think you might be thinking of MTA on that.
Okay. Okay. So I thought we asked that of you all last budget. Okay, the other question was on the sanitation deposit that is required for special events that Chair Vercher had mentioned. The cost is currently $100, correct?
$500.
$500. Is there an opportunity to increase that?
It is actually within the code, so we would need to amend the code.
So it would take council action to amend the code?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I had another thing. Oh, the roving trash truck. Is that from the last budget? Is that still in existence?
Still roving.
Okay, so that's doing well. And Councilwoman Henderson had asked my other question. I hope I got all my clarification on it, on the helping of MTA with the bus stops. That's only by on demand, so that's not really affecting this budget?
We actually pick up the litter baskets where you see just like a basket all by itself on the street, maybe with a stop sign, with a bus sign. But as far as the actual shelters, MTA picks up all the shelters.
Okay. Well, again, thank you. I want to give a shout out to Ali Athis, who comes to our community meetings on behalf of Public Works. He is excellent with constituents, so I definitely don't want to miss saying thank you for allowing him to come out to our meetings. Sharon with the cleanups and everything else that you respond to. Don Reed for being very responsive as our paving manager and making sure that our streets are being paved quickly and expeditiously in budget. So again, I appreciate your fiscal leadership, and I thank Public Works for everything you do.
And Councilmember, we've always enjoyed working with you as well.
Thank you so much, Council Lady Johnson. Our last council member, Council Lady Van Rees.
Thank you very much. I know it's been a very long evening. I wanted to thank you for all of the work that's been done over the last year in the annexed portions, both in 7, 8, and 9, and some in, I guess, 15 as well. I can't thank you enough for being able to communicate a very difficult process to so many different constituents. The $1.3 million cost for this year to get things going, I had a question about whether or not that's going to be an ongoing cost, or that's some of that is for some equipment, and then it kind of ends up being part of your maintenance as well. Just trying to see what that's going to be like following years.
The equipment cost was funded via capital money last year so that we could go ahead and place the orders for the equipment, because it's taking quite a while to get those pieces in. I think what we were given a 6 to 8 month time frame, Philip, to get those in. So that's been part of the delay of going ahead and hiring the employees and getting them trained. But what you see in this operating budget should be basically what we have year over year. So this 1.2 is going to stay, because this is personnel expenses, it's gas and maintenance on the fleet, it's contracts.
I get it. Revenue neutral is a beautiful couple of words together. I know that we tried really hard in District 8 to make it revenue neutral, even per the household, to where the cost of what their property tax was going to go up was going to be pretty darn close to what the cost of the trash has been for them. But I'm concerned because I'm not real clear, and I know the numbers exist, but it's been kind of squishy as to exactly what the revenue was for the annexed portion of the USD.
And that I don't have, because that gets collected through the property taxes, and it goes
I'm wondering
into
if
you
guys could get that to us, because I'm thinking when we estimated it earlier, we were hoping that there'd be about $500,000 extra that the folks, at least in District 8, were adding to the general fund. And so I want to be clear what it is that the folks in these districts are adding to the bottom line beyond a revenue neutral state, because we know that we're going to be getting additional benefits that are hard to even describe sometimes. One of those things, of course, is the work on Station Boulevard. I want to thank everybody at Public Works for finally getting that off the ground. If I'd have known how important my first year was when I was a councilwoman, I would have paid attention. But thank you for getting us through that. And there was some comments earlier about decorative lights on roads. Of course, when you build a brand new road, you can do that. And so we appreciate I wanted to be clear that there will be decorative lights as promised on Station Boulevard.
Because it's within the budget.
Yeah, because it's in the budget for that. And so thank you for that. And finally, on the relationship with HUB, for working with the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods through initially the PIP and with the ITS, and for Public Works to really go out and be the test kitten to make this thing work. It's just breathtaking to think 70,000 requests have come in and people are just not really hearing about it. It's just crazy. So thank you for that. It's one of the most important things I think that I've worked on in the last 3 years. And so thank you for that opportunity. And I would like to just officially try to get some of those numbers so that we kind of know and if we can get that by district, because I'm sure all of us would be interested if that's possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Council Lady Van Rees. I want to thank always Budget and Finance Committee members for hanging in there with me tonight. I can't express how much I appreciate you, and council members also for being here at these budget hearings. Fabian, I was pointing out my committee members because they've been here every meeting. So also, we will be here again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We have Fairgrounds, Farmers Market, ITS and Metro 3, and the Board of Education. And remember, you can still go ahead and send those your questions to respective departments, and we can get that information uploaded to the SharePoint. Thank you so much to the department heads, to council staff, to our director, Brian Kelsey, everyone here. I know we ran a little late tonight. And with that, we are adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.org.